All right. So I want to introduce Jerry Silverman. He's going to talk about counting the Omer. This is a virtual tour around the Omer and its connection to Kabbalah and mysticism. So let's start with prayer. All right. Is that big enough?
I can see it.
There you go.
All right, Jerry, take it away.
Okay, together, although I won't be able to hear you, but
Oh,
I'll
wait.
assume you're all,
I guess we should.
unless you want to unmute, if you want to join me, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kitshanu B'mitzvotav V'tzivanu La'asok Divrei Torah. Susan, how about if you read the translation?
Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to engage with words of Torah.
Beautiful, thank you. So most of you know each other because you're from Road of Shalom, but there are two friends of mine, one Howie from Florida and Larry from near the White House, not too close. And they're Torah scholar friends of mine. So they're joining us today, and I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the rest of you joining as well. So this is how it's going to work. I sent an email to most or some of you to understand how I'd like to do this, because I don't want to hear myself talking for 45 minutes. So so Susan's going to call on you when I tell her that it's like reader number 1, reader number 2. I'll say that, and she's going to call on you. If you rather not read, and it's not going to be difficult, it's English. You should have no problem. But if you don't want to read, just say, I'll pass, okay? If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and hopefully we'll have time at the end. But I hope that I'll make everything so clear that you won't have one question. Let's see what else. I have to make a disclaimer. This is not a college course. This is going to be very, very superficial, because some of the stuff people spend decades, lifetimes studying this. So there's no way I could cover all of Kabbalah. This is probably making Ellen laugh, but there's no way I can teach a course in all of Kabbalah in 45 minutes. So this is just to whet your appetite. And if you want to study more, maybe we'll do another session at another day of learning or what have you. And finally, if you have any questions for me, other than this particular moment, you can send me an email if you want to know more, if you have any questions about my source material or anything else, transit routes in Philadelphia, history of William Penn, anything like that. I'll be happy to help you out with that. So without any further ado, so we're going to start with the first question, which is, what's the connection among matzah, springtime, and chametz? And the answer is that it's all about leaven. And you have to keep in mind that our major festivals.
Jerry?
Yeah.
Could you go ahead and share your screen?
Oh, I thought it was on. Hold on.
Yeah, I had to share the prayer.
Oh, wait a minute. So now I go back to Zoom. I'll make it a little bigger. I press share screen. And then I press share. You see it now?
We're good, thank you.
And then I'll make it, now I'm going to make it bigger, right? So I go back to the bottom and I press the little thing next to the 4 buttons. Is that good?
That is good.
Yay. So this was the question I just read, and now we're on this. So it's all about the leaven, and you have to keep in mind that our 3 major festivals, we call them Chagim, began with agriculture. History, laws, ethics, everything like that was added on into this complicated mess. So you always have to keep in mind that agriculture was the main reason for these things. So reader number 1.
Ben Sion, could you read?
Another ritual the Torah commands during the spring season is the 7-day festival of matzot, during which only matzah may be eaten and all leaven must be removed from the home. These rituals had an agricultural meaning tied to Israel's harvest seasons. The practice of not eating bread during this period, even in years of plenty, and instead eating only matzah, was meant to mark the liminal period between the end of the barley harvest and the beginning of the wheat harvest.
Thanks. And the word liminal, I never heard that word, but it means transitional. So, okay, so thank you, Vincian. And now we'll go to the next reader.
Larry, would you be willing to read?
Sure. Part of marking this shift was the requirement to start fresh by actively removing or destroying all leaven and leavening agents from in one's possessions. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the very first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day to the seventh day, that person shall be cut off from Israel.
Thanks. So clearly, number one, they knew what matzah was because God's telling them to eat matzah. This is before they left Egypt. So that Baba Maisa you learned from your Aleph teacher in Hebrew school, it's nice, you know, we learn stuff in elementary school because that's either all the teacher knows or that's all that the kid could handle at the time. But as you get older, that's why you need to come to Rosh Shalom Days of Learning, because you didn't learn it all in elementary school. No way. So the other thing is that besides already knowing about matzah, is there it is again about the leaven. Okay, so keep that in mind. Next reader, please. Oh no, I'm going to talk about the top part. So does that arrow show up?
Yes.
Okay, so you see wherever I got the source from that it says that, whoops, whoa, go back. That the Jews had to destroy their sourdough and start over again. It was a bad omen to have leftover wheat because they're counting 7 weeks to the new wheat harvest. Passover is the barley harvest. 7 weeks is the wheat harvest. So having old wheat would contaminate the new wheat. That's what they believed. That's why you had to get rid of all the chametz. Okay, next reader.
Howie, could you read?
The spring new year for the shepherds and farmers. The practice of eating only barley flatbreads on the festival of Matzot to ensure a good harvest parallels the sacrifice of an animal on Pesach to ensure the health of the herd. The ancient Israelites were a polymorphic society, meaning that they had settled farms and moderate-sized herds. The spring season was an important time for both these groups, as the newborn animals and the new wheat crop were both arriving. The dual celebrations of Pesach and Matzot were a way for the Israelite shepherds and farmers to each make a new beginning that spring offered and to do what they could to ensure that the coming year would be a bountiful one.
Thanks. So that's why people would bring sacrifices to the altar in Jerusalem in hopes of a good crop or a good year. So when the Jews left Egypt, you know, that whole thing about making an animal sacrifice for a good herd in the future, that got stuck into the story as well. And you have to remember the Pesach and Shavuot are like bookends of survival. Barley and wheat were the main sources of nutrition. And there's also an awful lot of superstition that gets woven into it as well. So the next is we're going to talk about what exactly is an Omer, how do we say the count, and why do we do it at night? So next time, tonight, for example, if you hear the rabbi reading the blessing for the Omer, listen really carefully because you may never have realized how it's worded that we say it twice in two different ways. And there's a specific reason for that. So I'll just talk about this quickly. This shows why the metric system was really important to civilization, because if you notice back in the Bible, there were all these strange measurements, ephah, logs, different numbers, 72 of this, 12 of that. But the bottom line is we think that an Omer was about 2.3 liters, which is around 2 quarts. Okay. Next reader.
Brian, could you read?
With recording?
Yeah.
according to halakha, a person may only recite the blessing while I missed a word, while it is still night. Remembers the count the next morning or afternoon. The count may still be made, but with, wait a second, I'm missing words here, without, but with.
You know what? Some of the words got cut off, I think, when I scanned it. So just do your best.
All right. If one
it up.
forgets to count a day altogether, he or she may continue to count succeeding days without blessing. The Omer may be counted in any language.
Okay, sorry about that, Brian, but you did a great job of ad-libbing there. So
I tried to give it feeling.
You definitely came across. So why do we do it at night? Because it says that we have to count the days. We have to have complete days, as you'll see in the next source. So a complete day, according to Jewish ritual, days begin at night, the night before. So that's why you have to say the blessing at the beginning of the day, which is actually at the beginning of the night. I think everybody comprehends that. Okay, next reader.
Ellen, could you read? Oops.
The mitzvah of Separat HaOmer is mentioned twice in the Torah. First in how do you pronounce that, Jerry?
Vayikra.
Vayikra, Leviticus 23:15-16. And from the day after the Shabbat, from the day of your bringing the Omer Hat Nufa, sheaf of the elevation offering, you shall count 7 weeks. They shall be temimot, complete or perfect. You shall count until the day after the 7th Shabbat, 50 days. Then you shall present an offering of new grain to Yud-Heh Vav-Heh.
Okay, next reader. Thank you, Elle. Next reader.
Muriel?
Then in Deuteronomy 16, 9 through 10, you shall count 7 weeks. Begin to count the 7 weeks from the time I can't read that. The
sickle.
The sickle first, there's a couple of words hidden. First put to the standing grain. Then you shall keep the festival of weeks of Adonai. All right, I'm missing words.
Adonai, your God.
Oh, okay, your God, contributing a free will offering in proportion to the blessing that you have received from Adonai, your God.
Thanks. So you notice one of them mentions the number of days and the other one mentions the number of weeks. Okay, so one is from Leviticus, one is from Deuteronomy. They're talking about the same thing, but they're counting the days or weeks differently. And it's really no different than if you think about Friday night services, when you do L'cha Dodi, when we sing the first paragraph, Shamor v'Zachor. Shamor means to remember, to observe, and that comes from Deuteronomy 6 in the 10 Commandments. And Zachor means to remember, and that comes from Exodus 20, because there are 2 versions of the 10 Commandments, and they are not exactly the same. So L'cha Dodi, they took those 2 words which appear in the same commandment, but are 2 different words are used, and they put them together in the song. So let's see here. So next is the count. So I'll tell you about the count. So we said after sundown, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat haomer, on the counting of the Omer. Then you state the total number of days and weeks. For example, the 23rd would be 23 days, and then you say how many weeks and how many leftover days. So that would be 3 weeks, 3 times 27, plus 2 days. 21 plus 2 is 23. And that's how we say the Omer, okay? Hope you're all hanging in there with me. Next reader, please.
Karen, would you like to read? And I'm having problems unmuting people for some reason. Let me try unmute all.
Okay.
And mute all again.
We're just asking them not
and unmute Jerry there. Somehow I'm not able to unmute other people right now.
Uh-oh.
Let me see. Phyllis, would you be able to read?
I
If
can
they
unmute
click on
myself.
their own microphone, they'll be able to unmute themselves. On the
Yeah, I
left
just
hand.
unmute myself. This is Bonnie. Not being sheepish.
Okay. Why does the mezuzah go on a diagonal? A slanted mezuzah is a great example of a compromise in Jewish law, shira.
Here's the name of the person that asked the question. Go ahead.
Ah, okay. It might look screwy to you, but it's actually a demonstration of two legal authorities literally meeting in the middle. Way back in the 11th century, Rashi, a French rabbi and commentator, opined that when you put up your mezuzah, it should be hung vertically. But then Rashi's grandson came along. He's known as Rabbeinu Tam, and he wrote that a mezuzah should be affixed horizontally because the Ten Commandments and the Torah scrolls were kept horizontal in the Ark, in the temple. 150 years later, Rabbi Jacob Ben Asher, also sometimes called the Tur, was writing his book of Jewish law, the Arba Turim. In it, Ben Asher suggests that the way to hold up the precedence of both Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam was to split the difference and affix your mezuzah at a slant, pointing into the room.
So, thank you. So that's another example of compromising, and that's how I think that's symbolic of how the Jewish people have lasted this long, because we're constantly compromising and making the best of a situation. So, the same way that we say the blessings for the Omer, that we have, the one way with the days and the other way with the weeks and the days. So before we go to the next, I want to show you a really quick video. Okay, now let me make sure I do this right. My tech angel. Does that show up?
Yes.
You see a rabbi?
Yes.
Or a somebody? Okay, here we go. See if you recognize this.
Where I learned there is more to life than talk. You should know what's going on in the outside world.
Careful, my paper. Why should I break my head about the outside world? Let the outside world break its own head. Well put.
He's right. As the good book says, if you spit in the air, it lands in your face.
Nonsense. You can't close your eyes to what's happening in the world.
He's right.
He's right and he's right. They can't both be right.
You know, you're also right.
He is right.
So you probably recognize that from Fiddler. So getting back to our questions. So now I go back to the next, where to go here?
To the right.
How's
Yep.
that? Is that it? Okay. So, what?
There we go. There we go.
Right? It's all right?
This is good.
So what does an Omer counter look like? And is there an app for that? And of course there is, and we'll go to see some Omer counters. Now these are like a perfect gift for someone who already owns a menorah, a challah cover, Shabbos candles, a spice box, an etrog holder, and other items. So here is on the right, the 49 days to count. Here's a more modern version. Another beautiful artistic version, a Lego version. This one, you just turn the handle and it will tell you each day, each week. I think that one's really cool. You just turn the wheel. And if you really need to, and I installed it on my phone, that up pops these meditations for each day. And also it'll tell you a different aspect of the 49 days and something to do at the bottom of each screen each day that will tie you into the Kabbalah, the mysticism, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So now I had, for the sake of time, I had cut out the bottom part of this question. Maybe another time we'll talk about that. But let's just talk about the semi-mourning aspect of these days. And as you can see, weddings and marriages are not allowed. Traditionally, people cut their hair just on, except for one day, we'll talk about that. You're not supposed to listen to instrumental music, and you're not supposed to purchase or wear new garments, okay? And what in the world is that all about? So next reader, please.
Pastor Talton, could you read? Pastor, are you able to read?
I'm trying to unmute myself.
I got you.
We hear you.
Okay. Some students of folklore trace the mournful nature of the days of the Sephira to the Roman superstition against marriages in May. The 19th century writer, Julius Landsberger of Darmstadt, cites Ovid, who explains that the Romans did not solemnize marriages in May due to the fact that this was the month of the Memoria, when the souls of the departed returned to wander over the earth and disturb the peace of the living. Funeral rites, Memoria, were held to appease the spirits, and no Roman maiden would jeopardize her happiness by marrying during a month associated with funeral ceremonies. According to Landsberger, the Roman superstition was adopted by the Jews, who subsequently lost
all recollection
of its origin and found a new rationale for it in the tragedy of Akiva's disciples.
Thanks, and we'll see what that means. Can we have the next reader?
Bonnie, could you read? There.
Here we go. Okay. According to 13th century authorities, the melancholy of the season was in remembrance of the victims of the Crusades in the Rhineland in 1096 and 1146. Crusades are recollected in the Tinyatim of Lament during the Sabbaths of the Sephira, together with mention of another series of massacres that took place in the springtime. In other words, those perpetrated in 1648 to 1649 by the Cossacks and the Poles. Do you want me to continue? Or?
Yes.
Okay. The revolt of the ghettos against the Nazis in the month of Nisan is included in the discussion of the Sephira, and mention is made of the Knesset's decision to fix the 27th of that month as a Memorial Day for the victims.
Thanks. And PUTM are poems. Okay, let's see, where are we up to? Next reader, please.
Peter, could you read?
The semi-mourning period is observed for one symbolic and one practical reason. Practically, Ashkenazi Jews keep the low profile of mourning because the spring was, and the rest of it is blocked off by pictures.
Oh, really? Uh-oh.
Yeah, I can't see to the right.
Well,
I'd be happy to.
Are you seeing all of our pictures?
I'm seeing on my screen has pictures down the right, Jerry's picture, Susan.
Okay, if you go up to the top, at the very top of there's a black bar with some icons. The top left one says hide thumbnail video.
Hide thumbnail videos. I'm not actually seeing that.
Okay, I can read. Let's see. Because the spring was pogrom season when European rulers passed anti-Semitic decrees and mobs looked for the slightest excuse to attack.
Thanks. And the next reader?
Rochelle, can you read?
Are we still on this one?
Some rabbis.
I got it. Some rabbis actually think that the mysterious plague may be code for thousands of Jewish people being killed by Romans. For writing the Bar Kokhba for fighting the Bar Kokhba revolt that Akiba supported around 132 CE. Others, though, come to the fascinating conclusion that the deaths came because the students were unpleasant to each other, that who's moving this? Oh, I am. That the plague was a manifestation of the rot at the heart of the students.
Thanks. It's really fascinating that we're in the middle of a plague and we're talking about another one from 2,000 years ago. Thanks, Rochelle. Nice to hear your voice. Okay, the next next question is, when is Shavuot celebrated and what's its mystical aspect in addition to the historic and agricultural aspects? So can we have another reader, please?
Gail, could you read?
Begin counting the Omer.
No, Karaite Jews.
Karaite Jews and Israelite Samaritans begin counting the Omer on the day after the weekly Sabbath during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, Passover, rather than on the second day of Passover, the 16th of Nisan. There are several reasons for this. On the one hand, Shavuot is the only holiday for which the date is not expressly given in the Torah. Instead, the Torah tells us to determine the date of Shavuot by counting 50 days from the morrow after the day of rest.
Thanks. So I'm not sure if many of you ever realized, but all the other holidays specifically say the 5th of Nisan, the 6th of Tammuz, etc. But it never says Shavuot will be celebrated on and then the actual month and day of the month. So people argued over what does the morrow after the day of rest mean. So again, so the Karaite Jews, and there are about 40,000 of them, mostly in Israel. Some live in the United States, some in Ukraine, and they stuck to the Torah, to literally only the 5 books and no Talmud, no interpretation. They took the Bible literally word for word, and so they celebrate it starting with the Shabbat, the day of rest that comes after. See, is that the one that the day after the weekly Sabbath? Okay, so if there's a Sabbath in the middle of the week of Passover, then the day after that Sabbath would be the beginning of the counting of the 49 days. Okay, next reader, please.
Harriet.
A difference?
A difference between Karaites and Samaritans as opposed to rabbinic Jews is the understanding of morrow after the day of rest. Rabbinic Jews take the day of rest as the first day of Passover, while Karaites and Samaritans interpret this Sabbath to be the first weekly Sabbath that falls during Passover. As a result, the Karaite and Samaritan Shavuot is always on a Sunday, although the actual Hebrew date varies, which complements the fact that a specific date is never given for Shavuot in the Torah, the only holiday for which this is the case. The counting of Karaite and Rabbinic Jews coincides with the first day of Passover, when the first day of Passover is on the Sabbath, because the date of the Samaritan Passover usually differs from the Jewish one, often by as much as a month. The Karaite and the Samaritan counting rarely coincides.
So it gets even more complicated because I read another source which does not agree, because here it implies that the Karaite and Samaritan Shavuot is the same, but other place it'll say that the Samaritans, I believe it is, start counting on the Shabbat after the end of Passover. So, and then the Essenes, who discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, they had another way of interpreting it. So everybody had their own way of interpreting that sentence. So it's, it's literally, 3 Jews, 4 opinions, and so on. There are about 1,000 Samaritans still living in Israel, and they broke off from Judaism many, many thousands of years ago. Rabbis don't consider Samaritans to be Jewish, and their capital, their temple, is on Mount Gerizim in the north of Israel, not Jerusalem. That's a whole other fascinating story. They actually on Passover sacrifice lambs. Thousands of people show up on the mountain bringing their goats or their sheep rather, and they actually do the sacrifices up there and have a big barbecue. Okay, next reader, please.
Okay. Karen, did you want to read? All right, then I'll take a turn. Shavuot weeks occurs 7 weeks after Pesach. Shavuot is one of the major festivals of Judaism, a Yom Tov. In contrast to Pesach, the most widely celebrated Jewish holiday among American Jews, the celebration of Shavuot is comparatively muted. Perhaps this is due to the fact that Shavuot lacks a unique home celebration like the Pesach Seder.
Thanks. Next.
All right, so we're going to go back around, and this is not in a great order, but let's see. Benzion, could you read?
Okay, Shavuot started out as an agricultural holiday. In the days of the temple, the one in Jerusalem destroyed in the year 70, pilgrims would bring elaborately decorated baskets of their first fruits to the temple. If this were all there was to Shavuot, then it would be easy to see why Shavuot loses the festival popularity contest. Few of us are involved in the production of agricultural products other than grass lawns, and there's no temple.
Thanks. Next.
Muriel?
This is not a new problem. After how do you pronounce it?
Nebuchadnezzar. I think some letters are missing.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay, and his happy Babylonians conquered Judea. See, this is where I get cut off by the pictures. Something destroyed the first temple and exiled the Jewish community to Babylonia. Jews found themselves in a situation that robbed Shavuot of its agricultural significance. Judaism has stayed vital by reinterpreting its symbols when the old meanings lost their punch, blah, 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 of the world's religions have fallen by the wayside of history. To survive a religion most evolved, relevant and compelling to the people of the current day. And so was the case with Shavuot. It was invested with additional meaning to make up for its something agricultural. Stale agricultural significance. It became the anniversary of the day the Torah was revealed to the Jewish people at Sinai.
Thanks. Next reader.
Pastor, could you read?
In the 16th century, the Kabbalists, Jewish mystics, introduced a new innovative practice to put more kick in Shavuot. The Tikkun Lil Shavuot. The Tikkun Lil Shavuot is an all-night group Torah study session. According to legend, the Israelites at Sinai all fell asleep, and Moses had to wake them up to receive the precious Torah in the morning. To show how much we love the Torah, we stay up all night in contrast. Many Reformed congregations run a tikkun. Often they do not last all night, however.
Thanks. And the Center City Kahila, except this year, obviously, but for the last, I don't know, 5-10 years, they've been holding an all-nighter. They have ice cream at 3 a.m. They have breakfast at 7 a.m. It's amazing. Hundreds of people come to it. So God willing, they'll put it on a year from now. Next reader, please.
Ellen, could you read?
Sure. Just to say, I got an email from the Kahila. I think they're going to try to do it this year via Zoom.
Oh, wow.
So stay tuned. It might yet happen.
Yes, go to the Center City Kahila website and you'll probably be able to learn, but they're going to have something on Zoom.
Thank you so much. I didn't get that email yet. Thank you.
Yeah, I just checked the other day. They don't have the program listed yet, but
okay.
But it's definitely going to happen.
Thank you.
And it was in one of the RS emails too.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
So,
Take note.
okay. In 1847, the Reform movement added its own enhancement to Shavuot, the confirmation ceremony. This ceremony celebrates the completion of a typically 2 or 3 year program in Jewish education by youth typically 15 or 16 years old. The confirmation ceremony is held either during the Shavuot evening service or after or before it, and certainly before the tikkun, if there is one. The idea of confirmation was borrowed from the Christians. Today, confirmation serves as an important inducement to Jewish youth to stay involved in Jewish education after their bar or bat mitzvah at age 13.
Thanks. At this point, I'll tell you a funny little story that I had a professor at Gratz College who later denied that he ever said it, but he said that a rabbi came to him and said that we're thinking of moving bar mitzvah from 13 to 16. And the rabbi said, what's your motivation? He said, so the kids could learn more. And the rabbi said, well, more what? He said, well, more of what they're already learning. And he replied, then I suggest you move it to 10. That's terrible. What are sfirot and how do they relate to God and the human body? Can we have the next reader?
Phyllis.
Okay. Pesach is about redemption. It is about the historical emancipation of our ancestors out of Egypt from bondage to freedom. It is also about our personal spiritual emancipation, the liberation of the spirit from bondage. The Omer, the 49-day period between Pesach and Shavuot, is a time of introspection, a time of reflection on our redemption, and a time to prepare and open ourselves to receive the Torah. The ancient Kabbalists envisioned the Sephirot, emanations of God's creation, as energy points on a tree known as the tree of life. This is an upside-down tree with roots at the top and the branches at the bottom.
Thanks. And could we have the next reader?
Harriet, could you read?
Yes. Jewish wisdom teaches that we are created in the image of the divine. The body is a physical manifestation of the divine image. We cannot,
We can
connect to the divine most directly through our connection and relationship to our bodies. The Sephirot are aspects of divinity in the world that manifest particularly in our bodies.
Thanks. Next reader.
Bonnie.
The system of Sephirot that we are referencing now comes from the 16th century Lurianic Kabbalah. It is a complex system of relationships and aspects between Sephirot. During this time, Kabbalists dedicate each day of the Omer to an opportunity for deeper spiritual connection, developing a system by which each week and every day of the Omer has a unique relationship between two Sephirot.
Thanks. And Lurianic refers to Isaac Luria, who's probably considered to be the father of Kabbalism or spiritual mysticism in Judaism. Next reader, please.
Larry.
Described as particularly divine and mostly inaccessible to the human experience.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Then there are the 7 lower Sefirot, understood as the foundational building blocks of humanity.
Thanks. Yeah, I didn't hear you say the first few words. Sorry about that. Okay, so you have the upper and the lower. And if we look at this picture, and there are so many, thousands of versions of this that you can find online. This is all related to the mystical book called the Zohar, which means brightness, and Kabbalah, which means reception. And you can see that the top 3 are supposed to be connected to God, and the bottom 7 are connected to us. So typically, you're not supposed to study the Zohar until you're 40 years old. So since all of you are way too young to study the Zohar, We're not going to spend time on this now, but maybe next year or another time we can have a deeper dive into this. And then we come to the Lachad the night, you know, when they take the Torah out and they go around the sanctuary with the Torah scrolls, and you sing this, and if you don't recognize it, I'll entertain you. Lecha Adonai hagedula v'hagavura v'hatiferet v'hanetzach v'hahod. And it wasn't until about a week ago that I attended a Zoom service, and the rabbi mentioned this, and oh my God, it was so cool that I never ever thought about those four colored words, because if you go back, so what were the words? Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, and Hod, and Gevura is here, and Netzach is here, and Hod is here, and here's Tiferet. So four of those words, when they take the Torah around, are part of the 10 Sfirot. I just think that's the bomb, as we used to say. Okay. What are the 49 mystical attributes connected to the 7 weeks, and why do we chant the pairs of Sfirot 112 times? Well, we're not going to spend time on this, but you can see that on the left at the top, you have the 7 that apply to human beings and what each attribute is connected to. And then the 7 of our ancestors, the male ancestors, are associated with them. And then you have the 49 days, and they crisscross it. You know, so you have the first one's Chesed, so you have the Chesed of Chesed. And if you recall, Chesed is loving kindness, so it's the loving kindness of loving kindness. And then you get the next one is the Gevura of Chesed, the justice or discipline of loving kindness, et cetera, all the way down. So you have 7 times 7 is the 49 days. Can we have the next reader?
Rochelle, could you read?
Sure. Yesod, bonding. During the 6th week of counting the Omer, we examine and refine the emotional attribute of Yesod, or bonding. Bonding means connecting, not only feeling for one another, but being attached to him, not just a token commitment, but total devotion. It creates a channel between giver and receiver. Bonding is eternal. It develops an everlasting union that lives on forever through the perpetual fruit it bears. You want me to keep going?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Bonding is the foundation of life, the emotional spine of the human psyche. Every person needs bonding to flourish and grow. The bonding between mother and child, between husband and wife, between brothers and sisters, between close friends. Bonding is affirmation. It gives one the sense of belonging, that I matter, I am significant and important. It establishes trust in yourself and trust in others. It instills confidence. Without bonding and nurturing, we cannot realize and be ourselves.
Thanks. And because today is the 36th day of the counting of the Omer, I chose this specifically. So if we have the next reader.
Brian, could you read? You have to unmute yourself.
Day 36. Okay. And I'm sorry, we're doing this on a cell phone. Hesed of Yosed, loving kindness of bonding. Love is the heart of bonding. You cannot bond without love. Love establishes a reliable base on which bonding can build. If you have a problem bonding, examine how much you love the one or the experience with which you wish to bond. Do I try to bond without first fostering a loving attitude? Is my bonding expressed in a loving manner? Exercise for the day. Demonstrate demonstrate the bond you have with your child or friend through an act of love.
I guess we can't do that virtually, so you'll have to pretend that one. Thank you, Brian. Okay, so here you have the name Adonai, Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh, and you have the 4 letters of God's holy name. And you see the 112, and if it's not obvious to you, the 112 comes from 18, which is Chai, and 18 times 6, the 6 directions, which you might remember from when you wave the lulav, Sukkot, east, west, north, south, up and down. And that's 6, and 6 times Chai, 6 times 18 is 108. And then you add 4 more for the light of God, which are the 4 letters of God's name, and that's where you get 112. 12. And then let me just say that many cultures chant or use beads as mantras, rosary beads. I watched the movie Airplane a couple days ago, and if you recall, half the movie takes place in the airport with all these Hare Krishna people in the airport. I completely forgot. So a lot of people do a lot of chanting and mantras and counting. What is Lag BaOmer, and why do Israelis? Yes.
We have reached the 45 minutes.
Yes, we have about 5-8 minutes of more to go.
Right. So if anyone wants to leave or needs to leave now, if you'll wait one moment, I will put the link for the evaluation in the chat. But if you can stay on, Jerry's got some very interesting information to continue sharing.
Thank you. Yeah, I tried to time this so that we get every minute, and we're running a little bit over, but the best is yet to come. So don't leave. So what is Lag BaOmer? Why do Israelis burn wooden trash to celebrate? Okay, next reader.
Let's see. Howie, could you read?
Okay, Lag BaOmer is always on the 18th day of the month of Iyar. So what's up with that name? The word Lag is made of the Hebrew letters Lamed and Gimel, which together have a numerical value of 33. BaOmer means of the Omer. The Omer is the counting period that begins on the second day of Passover and culminates with the holiday of Shavuot, following day 49.
Thank you. Next reader.
I think Brian, can you read?
Sure. Let's see. According, let me say, make sure. Is it the red according to Zohar or purple?
Above it.
Besides being the day.
Yeah.
Okay. Besides being the day on which the plague affecting Rabbi Akiva's students ceased, Lag BaOmer is traditionally observed as marking the commemoration of the death, let's say, yeah, I know this yard sit in Yiddish, of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the famous first century Jewish sage in ancient Israel. After the death of Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 students, wow, Rabbi Akiva taught 5 students. Among them was Rebbe Shimon, that the latter went on to become the greatest teacher of Torah of his generation. According to tradition, on the day of his death, he revealed the deepest secrets of Torah in Kabbalistic works called the Zohar.
Okay, next reader.
According to the Zohar, Rabbi Shimon's house was filled with fire and light that entire day as he taught his students. At the end of the day, the fire subsided and Rabbi Shimon died. On successive years, his students sought to recreate that experience of light and mystical revelation by kindling bonfires and studying the Zohar in the light of the flames.
Thanks. I'm going to skip that one. And so Hebron settlers steal wooden furniture from Palestinian home for Lag BaOmer. That was an article I found. This was 3 or 4 years ago. The right-wing settlers broke into a Palestinian home and stole wooden furniture, probably to burn for Lag BaOmer, and that's kind of sad. And then the last one, that young Israelis steal wood from construction site. I don't advocate any of that, but just so you are aware. So now I'm going to show you a couple little videos, if I can do this correctly. So the first one, this is actually from a couple days ago. This was live from Meron, where the cave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lived, and they do this every year, and hopefully we can get this working here. You may not be able to hear him speaking, but he's speaking in Yiddish, actually, and it's a big honor for people to come up and grab a bottle of oil, and there were, I'm telling you, it was we're right at minute 50, so minute 50 on the video. That means for 50 minutes, they've been pouring oil onto this thing. And people just come up to hundreds and hundreds of bottles of oil are on this. The next part I want to show you is minute 3,
What are they pouring that onto, Jerry?
A
Is it
big
a fire?
big pile of trash and wood and God knows what. 352. Hold on. 352.
Is this for the purpose of burning, Jerry?
Yep. Yep. You'll see. Hold So I just wanted you to see they're all socially distancing with masks. I hope we can do this at Road of Shalom one year. We can do that in the parking
Jerry,
lot.
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Have these people heard that there's a crisis with global warming?
I don't want to even get into that. I'm sure that they would say God will provide.
I have to say that I saw the same thing in New Mexico when the local Indian tribe did this burning on Christmas Eve in Taos 2 winters ago. And I was thinking, have they not heard about a global warming problem? So I equate the English, the Indian, the Native Americans with the rabbis.
Thank you. And then the last thing we'll look at is, wait, where is it here? Yeah, one more video. This is about Lag BaOmer parades. Now, this might be the least known major holiday in Judaism. And see if I can find it here. We're going to watch a parade, just a few minutes of this parade. This is about, this is from 2013, but they do this every year. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe Schneerson, who's passed away, starting in 1950, asked that kids come to the headquarters in Brooklyn of the Lubavitcher World Headquarters. And he ordered that they have, starting in 1980, that they have parades and rallies in New York, Israel, and all over the world. So this is a compilation of parades in Cape Town, South Africa, and many other parts of the world.
Signs are up in Brown in Melbourne, in Cape Town, Moscow, and Spain. Dancing in Chicago, we're singing in LA. The great parade is going on, a worldwide mitzvah train. Parade, parading, join together hand in hand. Parade, parading, onward to the promised land. Parade, parading, wave your banner to the sky. Parade, parading, parading, wave your banner to the sky. Parade, parading, come on and join in our parade. Parading, join together hand in hand.
And you can just Google Lag BaOmer parade, and you will see from every year for the last 10 or 20 years, you will see all different compilations. Some go back to like the 50s. They're really, really cool to see the way people dress. But these parades take place in Moscow. In fact, this picture, if you notice, you see that? That's in Russian. This parade's taking place in the Soviet Union. So finally, let's see, wait, I have to go back to this, wait a minute. So, because there wasn't enough time to discuss the 49 attributes amongst ourselves, this is your homework. You can study, and next year maybe we can do that. And I just want to say to the Rabbi, thank you all for attending and participating. I really, really have to appreciate Susan Baer as our tech angel, because she really spent a lot of time helping me make sure that this came off fairly flawlessly. And I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Great job, Jerry. Thank you.
Thanks,
Jerry,
Jerry.
thank you for this.
Thank you.
Good
Great.
Shabbos to my bro and all.
Thank you.
So thanks for participating in the new day of learning, and I'm going to put the evaluation in one more time. If you've attended a session this week and you have not done an evaluation, please make sure you do that. That helps in the planning for the next one.
Yeah. Great job, Jer.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah, I
Jerry.
learned a lot.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. My pleasure. It was really fun.
See you later at 6 o'clock.
Okay, okay.
See you
Bye.
at 4:30 for meditation.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye. Bye, Larry, Rochelle, and Howie. Thanks for joining in.
Howie, it's Bonnie saying hi. Can you hear me?
You're looking good.
Thanks, you too.
Larry's on there from Washington too, I think.
Oh, Larry, I didn't get to see you.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, there you are. Hi. Hi.
Jerry, if you stop sharing your screen, it's easier for people to see everyone. Perfect.
See there. Oh, there's everybody.
And come to confirmation on Sunday. My granddaughter's being confirmed.
Oh, yeah?
Hold on a minute. Let me stop the recording.